Hi everyone, here is another video, and this one is called Commenting Your Code. And this is, hi, it's me. It's a subject that's really important even if it's not about telling a computer how to do something cool. Commenting your code is all about trying to make your work more comprehensible to yourself and to other people, okay? So to demonstrate this, I'm going to just write a little bit of code. I'm going to continue on in the drawing experiments project that I was in before. So I'm just going to switch over to that. So you may remember I was drawing a cone, and that is that cone. I'm actually going to delete this stuff here. You don't really need to follow along with this particular one. I'm just going to write some stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an ellipse at 250, 250. You can try and discern what I'm doing as we go along if you want to. If you've read the lecture notes, I'm probably going to do something very, very similar or almost identical to that. Before that, maybe I'm going to set the fill to 250, 200, 200. See what that looks like. And you can already tell that one thing that's happening right now is that I don't really know what's happening. Now I'm going to set the fill to 0. I mean, I kind of do, but not very much. I'm going to draw another ellipse, and I'm going to draw this one at 200, 250. And this is going to be a bit bigger, 30 by 30. I'll draw another one of these. Oh, not there though. That would be a bit silly. Ha ha ha. Yeah, and I'm just like, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to draw something. I'm going to use a stroke weight. You should look that up if you're interested. It's quite a neat little command. And I'm going to draw a line here from here to here and to there. How about that? I don't know why I said that to 274. That doesn't make much sense. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So I've typed in some code, right? And if we go and look at what that looks like, it's still open in my browser. It looks like that. I'm going to move this mouth down a little bit. So I'm going to change these Y values to maybe 300. And 300 there on the line. So I'm changing the vertical height by changing the start and end Y coordinates there, right? Much better. I mean, he looks kind of depressed, but, or she or they look kind of depressed, but that's fine. So that's what the result of that code is, and that's the code. And the thing that I want to basically point out is it's hard to read, right? If you just ran into this code with no explanation, you would take some time. Let's say you can't run it. If you can't run it, it's going to be a little bit hard to work out what it's a picture of. You can do it. You can simulate that in your head by working out all of the shapes. It's not really ideal, is it? And so one of the things that is regarded as super important in programming is this thing called commenting. And what that does is it allows us to add information to our program that's not part of the program bit, but it's just addressed to a human who's looking at it. And in fact, you can see that there are actually some comments already. So this thing here, all of these lines that have 2 forward slashes in front of them, and they're kind of gray in the editor, these are comments. So these comments, I'll talk about this a little bit later. What I want to do right now is just comment the code that I've made. So any line that does something semi-interesting, maybe, okay, set the background to mint, I guess. So now anyone who's looking at this line, right, they're going to know what they probably can already work out that we're setting the background color. They probably don't know what color this is just to look at it. So it might be polite or helpful just to point out that it's mint, may or may not be. These two lines here, this fill and then the ellipse, are drawing the head of my character, right? And I'm going to say a flesh-colored head. I'm getting a little bit lurid with my commenting, but there you go. So these two lines, which this comment is before and therefore applies to, say that what those two lines do is they're drawing the head of this thing and that it's flesh-colored, which is maybe, I don't know. That's not gross, like flesh is not gross, but it's a bit of a tough word, isn't it? So you can see, importantly, that the comment is usually written in front of the code that it applies to. Some people also write comments immediately on the same line, so we could say something like this, the flesh color and the head. That also kind of explains what these two lines do. I'm okay with you doing either or both of those if you want to. In my own programming, I always tend towards the comment that goes in front of the code that it applies to. Draw the eyes here, right? Black as the void of space. I'm definitely being overly poetic with my writing right now. Normally, but having fun with your comments is completely fine, so long as they explain what the line of code does. Draw the mouth. Perfect. So now I've added comments to this program, and we now look at what we see here. Suddenly, all of this code is much, much easier to understand. In particular, now if I'm editing this program and I'm like, oh, I want to do something with the eyes, I can just read through the comments and I know that I want to do something in here. So if I wanted to change the eye color to blue, for example, I know that I could just change that fill because I know that that is the fill that is associated with the eyes. So now if I go back, it's got beautiful, creepy blue eyes looking at us. Wonderful. There's a Limp Bizkit song about that, isn't there? I think. That's probably not something I should know, and it's probably something you don't know. Ha 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 ha. I won't stop the video, I'm just going to keep going. I won't even edit that out. So the comments are allowing me to know which bit of the code is doing what, and that makes my job a whole lot easier. It makes it easier just because it means that I think about what the different pieces of my code are doing while I write it. But perhaps most importantly, it's easier for me in the future when I come back to this and I've forgotten what the program does line by line. The comments help me very, very quickly get acclimatized to my code again. Thinking bigger picture, when we write code in our lives, it's often the case that other people who aren't us are going to look at it. That's especially the case in a course like this where your code is being graded, and I can tell you that comments are part of your grade, right? So you definitely want to include comments that explain your code. But even much larger than that, when you work in a company and you're coding or you're putting your code out on the internet, it's really important that your code explains itself and that people can therefore use it more easily. Now, just to complete this is the basics of how you do it, right? Anytime you want to write a comment, you put 2 forward slashes and then you write your little message. If I wanted to write more of a comment, I could do 2 more forward slashes and say, because it's a great color or something. That's not really that relevant, but there it is. Now, there aren't strong rules about commenting unless you're using a very specific documentation system. The main thing that I want you to think about, and really the most important thing, I'm just going to delete that one there, is you want to write simple messages in front of any group of code that does something significant. And what your comment should do is give you a nice, concise explanation of what's happening. Okay? This is especially true when you're doing something complicated, which you will end up doing as you get more advanced with your programming. But even for something as simple as this face drawing program, right? It is worth having comments explain what each set of lines is doing. Now note that you don't have to have a comment for every single line. You can group them together. Like this is the code that does the head. We don't need separate comments for the fill and the ellipse. And we don't necessarily need separate comments for the left eye and the right eye. Those sorts of things. It is somewhat at your discretion. It's always better to have more comments and not less. Now, in terms of a style guide, just so that we're clear on where I'm expecting to see comments, one of those places is that at the top of the template project, you can see this other style of comment, which is a forward slash and then asterisks to open it, and then asterisks and then a forward slash to close it. And in here, you should always, when you're submitting some work, it's a good habit to get into all the time, it should be a description of your project, right? So here you would write the title. So drawing experiments is the title of my project. You should write your name because you're the author. I really, really don't want to see people submitting work where my name is still there from the template project. That is a bad sign. And here I would write a description. So experimenting with P5's drawing and color functions. That's it. That's enough of an explanation for something as simple as this. Currently draws a face. That maybe is useful since the current code that's in there that's part of these experimentations with drawing draws a face. Okay? So every time you do a project, the top of each file that you use, and especially your main script like this, and for the moment really it's only the main script, should have this information in it in a comment. The next thing that should always be commented is your functions. So in here we see that there are two functions. So we see this word function setup, we see this word function draw. At the front of these, we should write a comment to describe what we do. Draws a face on the canvas. That's pretty accurate as to what this setup function does. All of the code inside the setup function is used to draw a face on the canvas, so we can explain the function that way. The way that I traditionally do this is that I include the name of the function, which is setup. I include the parentheses and the arguments if there are any, parameters if there are any, and then on a new line I start explaining what it does. My draw function, which is down here, does nothing. So I'm going to write does nothing. As you can see, it's empty, so it doesn't do anything. We'll put stuff in there later on. So explaining functions is important because they represent sort of big chunks of code, and again, you have this chance to kind of explain overall what the function is doing. And then, as we've just been seeing, you also want to comment your lines of code, as I've done here. So how many comments and what they say is somewhat up to you. The key is that they need to be descriptive. Draw a flesh-colored head is descriptive of what these two lines of code are doing. You don't want them to be overly long, and you want them to be clear. Very importantly, a thing that sometimes people fall prey to is something like this. If I write a comment for this, I might write draw an ellipse at 250, 250 with a width of 200 and a height of 200. Right? Now that does technically describe what the next line of code does, but it doesn't do a better job really than the line of code itself. And in particular, it's not really explaining what this ellipse is for. This comment does explain what it's for. It's saying that this ellipse, which is the shape, is being used to draw a head. So this kind of overly specific code-like comment, you don't want to do that, okay? So no, bad. Don't restate the code. That's it. That's about it in terms of commenting, actually. The key is always have a comment at the top of your file that explains what the file is doing in a very general way. Always have comments in front of functions like setup and draw, and later when you write your own as well, that explain the overall purpose of that function. And then line by line or group of lines, per group of lines, have a comment that explains what that code is doing. That way you will understand your code better, I will understand your code better and give you better grades, and anyone else who runs into your code will also understand it better. That is what you need to know about commenting for right now. I'm going to go back to GitHub Desktop, where I have made more changes in this drawing experiments process, and I'm going to say drawing experiment added comments. Okay, commit to master and push. That is all that we need to talk about with comments for right now. The key is to start practicing using them. They're going to be required when you submit exercises and projects and so forth, so it's worth getting into it right now because that is good. That's the end of commenting your code. This is my face. My face says to you, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video.